So what are we gonna do today, right? We are going to talk about IELTS, how to get IELTS Band 7 plus. So that is why we have decided to do it all in English, all right? So first, we're gonna look at the format of the speaking test, or at all the three parts. Secondly, I will explain some marking criteria that your speaking is assessed on. Then we're going to talk about some common mistakes that test takers make, and finally discuss some strategies to succeed and to get a high band. Well, let's get started with the format, the timing. Specifically, the test itself will last from 11 to 14 minutes. In part number 1, you will be asked some questions on familiar topics like, well, family, work, studies, clothing, food, and many others. Secondly, you will move on to part number 2, where the examiner will give you the card with the topic on it, and you will have to speak on the topic for up to 2 minutes. And finally, part number 3 is these are the questions related to topic from part number 2, but they are of a more abstract nature. We'll have a look at those a bit later. So this is an example of part number 1. Generally, you will be asked about 2 to 3 topics in here. That's the sample of part number 2. You will have 1 minute to get ready, or take some notes if you wish, and then you speak from 1 to 2 minutes. And finally, you will finish with part number 3, where you will be asked abstract questions generally about things in the world. And what about marking criteria? There are 4 marking criteria that your speaking is assessed on. The first one is Fluency and Coherence, Lexical Resource, Grammatical range and accuracy, and pronunciation. So let's get started with the first one, Fluency and Coherence. What is that basically? Are you able to talk without long pauses? Can you speak on an average pace, like it's not too fast or not too slow, but just like the speed of a native speaker? Are you able to speak without correcting and repeating yourself? And can you organize your ideas logically? These are all about fluency and coherence, right? And if we have a look at the official band descriptors, we can see that at band 6.0, you have to be able to talk at length. You can sometimes lose coherence, like pause, self-correct, or repeat yourself. But at band 7.0 and higher, you have to speak freely without an effort. So that's the main difference in fluency and coherence between band 6 and 7 plus. The second one is a lexical resource. What is lexical resource? In other words, that's your vocabulary. So over here, you have to paraphrase words. You've got to be able to talk on various topics freely. You need to use less common and so-called interesting vocabulary. I will let you know what it is a bit later. Well, fourthly, collocations and word connotations. But again, we're going to talk about them a bit later. And let's have a look at the official band descriptors. If you want to get 7 and higher, you see that the main difference in here basically is using less common and idiomatic vocabulary. Idiomatic vocabulary doesn't mean that you've got to use a bunch of idioms in your speaking. You know, many teachers can like give their students a list of 15 or 20 idioms and say that you're going to get 8.0. No, you are not going to get 8.0 just using idioms, because you have to be very careful with using idioms. So you should basically first use topic vocabulary. What is topic related vocabulary? Let's say you are asked questions about technologies. Well, what you can use: high-tech, technophile, let's say up-to-date technology. If you are using that range of vocabulary answering the question about technology, that means that you might get 7.0 and higher. Phrasal verbs, of course, you have to be aware of different meanings, right? Look at, look up to, simply look up, look back, and many, many others. You know, there are like thousands and millions of phrasal verbs. Paraphrasing, yeah, it doesn't mean that you actually have to paraphrase every single word, no, but you have to be able generally paraphrase things. And then as for collocations and words connotations, well, that's what's called idiomatic language, right? When you're talking about calling someone, you don't actually say do a call, you say make a call, yeah, and you don't say a quick car, rather you say a fast car. So if you're aware of these small differences in your language and in English language, and you know how to use them appropriately, well, this is when your idiomatic expressions or idiomatic language is going to be at a high level. And another important thing about idiomatic language is that you actually have to be aware of connotations. What are connotations? You know, some words in English have like different shades, we can say, like associations, certain ones. So if you're talking, let's say, about your friend and you are describing his appearance or her appearance, you might use the word slender, skinny, or thin. So, and in this situation, thin is going to be neutral, the most neutral, while slender or slim means that the person is well built, yeah, and skinny, that's a negative connotation of the word thin. And going back a little bit more about lexical resource, if you want to get 7.0, try to avoid general words like good. That's a very common word. Many test takers use it, like, you know, when they're talking about food, they can say, yesterday I went to the restaurant and the food was really good. Instead, what you can say, the food was fantastic, it was scrumptious, very delicious, but not good, please, right? Or you're talking about the trip that you went on last summer and you climbed the mountain and the views was really good. No, they were not good. The views were breathtaking. That's what you can say, right? So be specific. And idioms. One more thing about idioms. If you do not really know the exact meaning of the idiom, or you're not sure about the context this idiom can be used, do not use it. You can freely get 8.0 easily if you are not using idioms. And the next criterion for assessment is grammar and accuracy. So that's more or less clear, right? If you want to get 7 and higher, you need to use a wide range of structures. Of course, you can make some mistakes. It's okay. Yes, you're not a native speaker, but these mistakes should not block the communication. So if we have a look at official band descriptors, 6.0, 7.0. At 6.0, you are able to use a mix of simple and complex structures, but with some inappropriacies, right? While at band 7.0, you mostly produce error-free sentences. And over here, you can see most common grammatical structures that you have to master if you want to get 7 and higher in speaking. These are passive tenses, modal verbs like can, could, may, might, have to, should, and others. Different perfect tenses, comparative structures, right? Conditional types, yeah. And finally, different ways of talking about future. So if you want to get 7 and higher, once again, work on your grammar. That is important. And finally, the fourth criterion is pronunciation. The first thing that many students are worried about is their accent. And does it matter? Well, unless your accent interrupts, like unless your accent blocks the communication, right? No, if your accent, if your accent is blocking the communication, this is where you do have to worry about that. But generally, do not worry, right? Because if you have a look at the descriptors, you do not see anything about your accent. Yeah, L accent, L1 accent has minimal effect on intelligibility, meaning that you can be understood throughout your speaking. But still, it doesn't mean that you don't have to work on your pronunciation. There are different features, pronunciation features, that you want to work on if you want to get a higher band in pronunciation. But the first one is clarity, of course. You should be clearly understood throughout your speaking. And now let's talk in more details about common problems that students make, that students have in parts 1 to 3. At first, speaking part number 1. If you remember, this is the part where you will be asked general questions on familiar topics. So the most common problems are: your answer is too short or it's too long. Well, too short, of course, you try to avoid that because the examiner simply cannot assess you because you are not speaking enough, not speaking long enough to understand what your level is. Too long, well, it's not part number 3. It's not part number 3. That is why you don't have to speak for 2 minutes, right? Answering only one single question. Number 2 is memorized answer. What is the problem with memorized answers? Let's say I am asking you a question about, well, what do you dislike about your hometown? And the students will simply tell you, my hometown is nice and big, and you will tell me just generally about your hometown. And this is where I can easily spot that you have memorized your answer. You didn't listen to my question because I was asking you specifically about disadvantages of your hometown. Number 3, monotonous speech. What does that mean? Monotonous speech basically means that you're speaking like a robot. Yeah, why does this happen? You don't use any pronunciation features just because you're too worried. Yes, the IELTS exam is pretty stressful, yes, and many students will just feel really shy and they are simply not able to talk freely. So that's why at home, simply practice your pronunciation. How you can do that? Well, you can watch different documentaries, movies, BBC channels, whatever, and simply imitate. Just imitate or copy sentence stress and intonation. And finally, the 4th problem in speaking part number 1 that many students have is they try to impress the examiner by using lots of uncommon vocabulary. And this is not a good way to get a high band. I'll explain why. Because first of all, there are lots of questions, and don't worry, you can show your lexical resource if you have a high level, like generally, a high level of English. But you don't have to use this specific vocabulary answering every single question, right? It's not a good way. And what are some of the strategies that you want to use in order to help you to get band 7 and higher? First of all, pay attention to grammar in the question. And here I do not mean a range of grammatical structures. No, simply if the question is asking you about some experience that you had in the past, you answer the question in the past. Of course, you can link it to the present somehow, but first answer the question. Yes, then be coherent. Coherent, you remember that fluency and coherence, this is the first marking criterion for assessment, and you need to link your ideas. Do not just jump from one idea to another one without any linking. For example, let's have a look at this question. Very simple and typical question from part number 1. What is your hometown like? Well, the student who probably did not prepare for IELTS speaking would have said, it's very small, it's very nice, but small. Answer number 2, that's the student who has worked on their speaking before taking a test. It is a popular city with a variety of things to do. It has many parks, restaurants, and shopping centers. However, so that's where you introduce the opposite view. Traffic and pollution are 2 disadvantages of my hometown. So coherent, yes, very coherent. Be specific. That's another strategy for part number 1. The questions will ask you a certain thing. So you've got to answer the question. Don't speak generally. Like here, this is a too general answer. Nice but small. Does it say anything about your hometown? It doesn't. Instead, you can develop that saying that it's populous, using adjectives. There are many things to do there. Which one specifically? Many parks, restaurants, and shopping centers. Comparisons, reasons, and examples. And this is what can help you to develop your answer. So you've got, this is the first thing you need to remember when doing this part. You need to develop answers, because if you say this one single sentence, how the examiner can understand whether you are 6.0 band or 7.0 band, there is no way, simply. What you can do, yes, you state your answer, you can give some reasons why you think so or why it is like that. You can compare things, or you can simply give an example from the real life. So all these things you have to practice before you take the exam. And at the exam, you need to be fluent and sound natural. This is the thing number 1 to remember. Because if you show up at the exam and you're doing part number 1, oh, did I use passive voice? Did I use conditionals? No, you don't have to think of that. Did I use some less common vocabulary? You have no time, just be fluent. Because very often lexical, thinking about using some less common vocabulary or a variety of different grammatical structures will affect your fluency eventually. So first of all, be fluent, relax and be natural. That's the exam. You should have prepared at home. And the second part, number 2, as far as you remember, that is the card and the topic given in the card. So you have to speak on the topic for up to 2 minutes. Every card will typically have 4 bullet points, which will help you to brainstorm some ideas and speak for 2 minutes. What you need to remember, you are given 1 minute before you start speaking, and many students will try to impress the examiner by saying, well, I don't need any time, I can start right now. Sorry, but you will not be given any additional points for the fact that you have started without writing a plan. So don't do that. Yes, instead use it and answer the question completely and speak for up to 2 minutes. As for the most common problems related to this part, which are they? Well, the first concern that the students actually have is that they say, I cannot speak for 2 minutes, it's too long. So don't think about 2 minutes, think about telling a story, not speaking for 2 minutes. And what is the reason why they cannot speak for 2 minutes is the fact that they run out of ideas. Why do they run out of ideas? Because they simply do not develop these ideas. And why do they not develop these ideas is because instead of writing a plan, they think too much about what to say. Like describe a city or country you want to live most in the future. They will, for 1 minute when you have to be writing down a plan, they will think, which city do I really want to live in? Or which country? I have never thought of that. Forget it. You can talk about anything. You can even talk about the city you're currently living in. Another problem is mechanical linking. What does that mean? Mechanical linking is that when you jump from one idea to another one, to another, and to another without any transition words. So you simply start talking about the city, then, oh, where is it located? It's located somewhere there, yeah? Like, let's say in the central part of Russia. You don't link your ideas, and that's what's called mechanical linking. Some students complain that they actually do not have enough vocab, simply, or knowledge about the topic, But remember that it's not a knowledge test. It's simply a speaking test. So you will not be assessed on the content of your speaking, but rather on the way you present your ideas. And the fluency in vocabulary, of course. Fluency usually is affected by the fact that you run out of ideas. So you don't have enough ideas, you will stop, you will hesitate, you don't know what to say, and so on and so forth. Other students will, while speaking, will think of, oh, which vocabulary should I use? This or that, and again, it will affect or impact your fluency. Let's have a look at what we can do with that, with all these problems. There are several ways how you can help yourself and get a higher band. So first of all, you should write a plan, of course. As far as you can see here, these are not complete sentences, but rather just key words, which will help you to then, while you're speaking, will help you to make it up like a story, you know, coherent story. Instead of focusing on 1, 2, 3, 4 bullet points, you can ask yourself the 6 questions simply: what, who, when, where, how, and why. These questions will help you to get more ideas. So if you read this card, right, and if you read the plan, in fact, some of the keywords which are written here do not match the plan. Forget about these things. These are here just in order to help you think of what you can possibly talk about, right? Instead, well, you can write down, of course, what the city is. That's your city, Tokyo, let's say, one of the largest cities. Then, what do you know about it? Yes, this is the third one. You can talk about buildings, you can talk about fashion, you can talk about sakura, we can talk about food, working culture. You can describe the city in general, right? Like say it's very futuristic, high-tech and modern, that there are high living standards there. You can mention, like, let's say a couple of words about their mentality and about the opportunities that you can get for studying and working as an expat. Yeah, and all these things now will definitely lead you to 2 minutes answer, for sure, 100%. And finally, grammar. What about grammar? You don't have to write it like that, like I have written it right here. I mean, at the exam itself, right? When you're making a plan, that's your plan, not this. This is not part of a plan. That's what you can do when you're getting ready for it at home. So you can think of possible structures you can use here, like present simple, present continuous. Can you use it here? Surely, yeah, the card is basically in the present. Modals, yes, easily, very easily. Can, could, may, might, probably, it has to be, yes, these are modal verbs. Can you use past simple talking about this? Well, you see that they're asking you to talk about the future, but you can still use past. How? Well, you can start your card saying like, well, I would like to tell you about Tokyo. You know, when I was a little girl, I remember I saw a very beautiful image of Tokyo in one of the magazines that my mom had bought. So you used past simple and you use past perfect, more than that, right? And that's how you can start. Yeah, that's the beginning of your story. Passive voice. Can you use passive voice? Yes, very simple. Present perfect and conditional times. Yeah, if I had a chance, I would move there as soon as possible. Yeah, that's the conditional that you can use. But remember that these ones you do at home. This is your practice, right? You do not have to write this at the exam because you simply have no time. You will be given only 1 minute. And the thing number one, the advice number one about part number 2 is tell me the story. Yes, it should not be like, oh, you know, students, what they do. When they are telling, when they're speaking for 2 minutes, first they will say like, what the city is. That's Tokyo. Where is it located? You lose your fluency if you read every single line and try to follow it. Instead, tell me the story about the city and country you want to live in. One coherent story. And let's have a look at sample 8 plus. I'll just give you like 30 seconds to check it out. So once you have looked it through, what you can see first, that the answer itself is a story. Yes, we do not start like what the city is or where is it located, what you know about it. No, you are telling the story. And that's the first thing you've got to know. It will be really easy for you. Once you understand the strategy, you can easily speak fluently. Secondly, are we using specific vocabulary here? Less common one. That's right. Populous metropolitan area. What else? Coexistent. Then we've got some glass skyscraper showcasing the finest 21st century technology. These are all uncommon vocabulary. Yes, quiet green lane aligned with wooden low-rise houses. And as for grammar, are we using here different grammatical structures? Yes, we definitely are. We definitely are. If we have a look at the first paragraph, we can find here present simple. We use the devices here, yes, like grammatical structures to make up compound sentences. And that's what can lead you to 8.0, right? Fluency, lexical resource, grammar, and finally pronunciation. And part number 3, if we are talking about part number 3, you remember these are the questions on a variety of topics, but they're more often abstract nature. And if we go back, you can see it right here. That's part number 3, questions. They will ask you to compare things, to talk about past and present, probably to explain the reason of why people prefer this or that thing. And what are the most common strategies here? What you do? First of all, you need to remember about developing your answers. This is a quite complex part where the questions are pretty difficult. So, and the examiner is actually waiting for you to support your point of view with some arguments. So you can use reasons, explain why you believe so. You can talk about possible results of what you have said. You can compare things, or instead you can remember an essay response. What is essay response? If you probably have already started getting ready for IELTS writing, you know that you have to state your answer, then explain it and give some example. That's why essay response will work really well for part number 3 too. And supporting examples, of course, you're welcome to use any examples unless they are relevant. Yeah, the relevant. Use a variety of grammatical structures. You are doing that once while you are getting ready for the test itself. But while you're speaking at the exam, you have simply no time to do that. That's why try to master those when you are getting ready. Number 3, learn topic-related vocabulary and learn vocabulary in the context. Topic-related vocabulary. Remember at the beginning of the webinar, I was telling you about questions and technologies, like you can use different words, up-to-date technologies, automation processes, high-tech buildings, or whatever, user-friendly interface. This is called topic-related vocabulary. Since you will be asked on a variety of different topics, yeah, and if you can use topic-related vocabulary for every single one, every different topic, yes, that's definitely a high band in speaking. And while you're learning this topic-related vocab, don't forget to check out the context. It's very, very important. Why? Because if you just, you know, look some word up in the dictionary and learn it, it doesn't mean that now you can speak naturally and using it everywhere in every single sentence. No, you're not. You need to check the context. How you can use this specific noun or the verb, adverb, or adjectives. Yes, and that's what you need to check. The next thing is being specific and being relevant. Let's say you are asked a question about advantages and disadvantages of living alone. right? You don't just say, well, there are advantages and disadvantages. Be specific. What kind of advantages and what disadvantages? Yeah, so what do we say here? What can we say possibly? Well, living somewhere on your own has some certain pros and cons with paraphrased advantages, disadvantages. I believe like our sense of independence can improve when we have no one to rely on but ourselves. It's the main benefit of living alone. So did you talk about benefits? You did, but advantages. However, so you introduce the opposite one, like the disadvantages. It would be tedious, or we may feel lonely when we have to sleep alone or do household chores without anybody's help. Were we specific? We were, definitely. Were we relevant? Yes, we were. We talked about one advantage and two disadvantages of living alone. Then being fluent, well, yes, this is number one. Remember your lexical resource, and if you're using lots of nice vocab and different structures, but you're speaking kind of slow, well, you cannot get it. Even if you're using very good vocabulary, you're slow, yes, and that's the thing that might prevent you from getting band 7.0 and higher. And what else do we have here is less common vocabulary, phrasal verbs and collocations. Going back to our second marking criteria, lexical resource, or in other words, vocabulary, where you, for band 7 plus, you need to use less common vocab and phrasal verbs and collocations. Now, the question that I am frequently asked by my students is, what is this less common vocabulary? How do I know that this word is less common and another word is more common? How do you know that? What you can do? You can open any general English advanced level book, textbook, yes, C1 level, and just study it simply. Because 7 plus, this is C1 level. And this is why the vocabulary you're using has to be of an advanced level, along with the grammatical structures, of course. And definitely while you are learning the C1 vocabulary, you will encounter some phrasal verbs and collocations. So all in all, in this general English textbook, you will definitely find topic-related vocabulary. It will be in the context 100%. There will be for sure phrasal verbs and collocations and less common vocabulary. And to finish with, I would like to show you this slide, which we saw at the very beginning, going back to our 4 criteria for assessment: fluency and coherence, lexical resource, grammar and accuracy, and pronunciation. So to keep it short, band 7.0, you need to be fluent, you need to use different cohesive devices to keep your speech logical and organized. You have to use a high level C1 vocabulary if it's 7 plus band. Grammatical range, we have seen a variety of different structures that will lead you to a successful result. Yes, the one that you need. Pronunciation, again, there are different features, pronunciation features that you want to master before you get your 7.7 plus band. Well, thank you very much for your attention.